On this edition of In the Gun, the Big 12 Media Days in the books out in Las Vegas, we'll discuss some things that head coach Neal Brown had to say about this year's Mountaineer program. We've also got some interesting rumors regarding another wave, the latest wave of college conference realignment. We'll get into all of that and more on this edition of ITG.
Let's go!
You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Go single! Joe, nuts!
ITG
with Wes, Owen, and Jed.
I've got the best teammates in the business here, all right?
And we're the three best friends that anybody could have.
Both played the game. They both know the game.
Look at this guy rumble. Owen Schmidt, how about that?
Shotgun formation. Ready, looking downfield. He's got a man open. Touchdown!
If you want top-level football analysis.
Took a whiz right past Pittsburgh subs or whatever it was.
I believe he said he had to go pee.
You're in the right place. You are In the Gun.
Because once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 173 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. It's time to talk a little Big 12 Media Days. I am Wesley Euler, best teammates in the business as always on this edition of ITG. You've got myself and you've got the single caller Jed Drenning. And as always, ITG is presented in part by our friends at BetOnline, your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season. Baseball, golf, soccer, the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. They've got it. Every stat, every matchup, live odds and spreads while the games are being played. And when the game is over, you can head over to their online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, unwind with one of over 150 slot games all on your phone. So head to the website today to get in on the action. Make sure you use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up. That's BLEAV for your 50% free bet credit deposit up to $250. That's all at BetOnline. The game starts here. And Jed, before we get into Big 12 Media Days, listen, you and I,
Before
this is something.
Quick question. You mentioned boxing. I have to ask, has the Tyson Paul fight been rescheduled? Have they said a date? Hey, and did you see the Tyson thing on social media going viral where he was blindfolded throwing the darts?
I did not see the blindfold throwing the darts thing that you're discussing. I'll have to do that. I'll have to look that up when we're done here. I'll put it in my notes. I'll put it in my notes right now.
I guess it's something that this host has guests do, and you throw three times. Well, they blindfold the guest, and the first throw hit the board, and they said, "Wow, look at that! Nobody ever hits the board. You hit the board." Wes, the next two dart throws were in the red. It was freaking everybody out from our mic. But look it up. But
that's real impressive.
So I didn't think anything's rescheduled. That's the case, right?
Yes, I couldn't tell you when it is. I couldn't tell you that I really give a hoot about anything involving either of the Paul brothers, but I know that it was rescheduled originally because Mike Tyson had some injury or something.
I want to see Tyson fight him. I do.
I mean, in theory, I do too, Jed, but I very much believe in the not feeding into the
I get what you're saying.
The things you'd like when I see a post about the Kardashian family, I don't go on there and comment, "Hey, nobody cares." I just keep it moving and I act like it's not part of my day because I don't want it to be part of my day. And I don't want either of the Paul brothers to ever be part of my day. Shove your prime up your bum.
Even if they're getting
not to be critical. Even if they're getting, I'll catch the highlights later on social media.
Yeah.
Another thank you to our friends at Toothman Ford and our guy JR. Everybody there at Team Toothman deserves a big shout out. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Jed, before we talk a little Big 12 Media Days, again, an ongoing story. Conference realignment never sleeps. I mean, it's been going on for decades. You and I have joked a couple times. It feels like we're closer to the final version of college football, certainly, than we are the first couple alliterations there. But with this, again, we know conference realignment is not done. It might be a little bit quiet right now on the home front, or at least it was until today. But Ross Dellinger, who works for Yahoo Sports, he was with Sports Illustrated for a long time, now with Yahoo Sports, basically suggesting that there's a surprising option for Florida State and Clemson to leave the ACC, not just the SEC potentially, not just the Big Ten potentially, but that the Big 12 might be in those early conversations with Clemson, with Florida State, maybe with some other ACC programs as well, too. Again, stories like this seemingly pop up almost every single day, if not every single week, right? You and I sometimes we text back and forth about these, but there's not much gravitas to it. Yeah, not much substance to it. But when a guy like Ross Dellinger is reporting it, when a website like On3 is writing an article about it just minutes before you and I started recording, those are legitimate sources. Those are voices and platforms around college football. And so, hey, I'm a little skeptical, obviously, just seeing this, but I do think it's fair to say that Clemson and Florida State are clearly exploring every avenue and that they at least haven't shut the door on the Big 12 being one of those avenues.
Yeah, it strikes me as a situation, and you positioned it pretty well right there, Wes. It's when a name like Ross Dellinger is attached to it, there's an element of credibility. So it's worth have paying attention to because there's some meat on that stick or on that bone, I should say.
Correct.
So I would imagine what's obvious is those two programs, those two brands, are motivated for a host of reasons to try and get out of the ACC. We've talked all the live long day about the ACC being stuck in that antiquated media deal for many years longer than they should be. Nobody suffers more than the two biggest brands carrying the flag, and that's Clemson and Florida State. So Clemson and Florida State are motivated as to whether or not they can, cut through what it would take to cut through to get out of that league. It doesn't seem impossible. I mean, it's not as ironclad, the grant of rights as people have maybe suggested, but it is tough. It's not easy. Their optimal choice. Look, there's the Power Three and there's the Super Two, in my estimation.
Yeah,
the
that's a good way
Power
to put
Three
it.
would include the Big 12, but the Big 12's not at the financial level or stratosphere as the SEC and the Big 10. But to Brett Yormark's credit, and that's some of what we'll talk about in this episode, he continues to try and pursue anything that might better position the Big 12. Now, I would imagine if the Clemson and FSU have their choice, they're going to want to land in the Big 10 and the SEC. But it very much seems like the Big 10 are being the academic snobs and trying to play the academic card to keep FSU and Clemson out. Now, if something would be less than optimal with an SEC offer, maybe Clemson and FSU would have their head, in fact, as Ross Dellinger might suggest, as an option on a swivel to look around and say, well, hey, what do you have to say, Big 12? I've also heard in the last couple hours about dalliances with Miami and with Louisville.
Yep.
I mean, we've said this a million times. Ultimately, it feels like what's going to happen. By hook or by crook, the SEC is going to ultimately blow up. And then what I figure to be the scraps of the SEC or scraps we're happy to have.
Scraps of the ACC, you mean? Yeah.
The ACC. That's what I should say. Of course, the SEC is not falling apart, but the ACC will blow apart. And the scraps of the ACC would be our old Big East mates. Your Louisville's, your Virginia Tech's, your Pitts. Of course, we'd love to have them at a conference as travel mates. And maybe even, depending on how the cards fall, who knows about Clemson and Florida State? Look, I've always just perceived it as a foregone conclusion that brands of that level would land in the SEC one way or the other. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball here. So
sure.
If in fact there's a puncher's chance to get those brands as part of the Power Three and the league that has easily best positioned itself right behind the Super Two, and that's the Big 12, who wouldn't love to have Clemson and FSU as part of our league? So Brett Yormark is doing what he does best, and that's he's not going to leave a stone unturned. So it sounds like there are at least some conversations on the superficial level based on what Ross Dellinger, a highly credible source, says. Look, it's an option. A lot of things would have to happen first, but don't rule it out. And I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I texted some of my guys on the Clemson FSU front, and they're like, look, everything's so close to the vest. If it's a lot more money, it will make sense, and we can get out of the ACC. Of course, they're going to entertain whatever is a lot more money. What are your thoughts here, Wes?
Well, my thoughts are, the ACC still is clearly going to take a blow at some point. It could be in the next month here. It could be another few years, but they're going to lose Clemson and Florida State at some point. I mean, that just seems inevitable. It's felt inevitable for a long time. And, you know, I know, though, I don't think there'll be a lot of people listening to this because I imagine the majority of people that listen to the In the Gun podcast are, number one, WVU fans, and then maybe some Big 12 fans who pick it up in their algorithm, you know, when we discuss certain topics as well, too, like conference expansion here. You might pick this up in YouTube if you're a Baylor fan, but since it's Big 12 conversation, it shows up in your feed or something like that. There might also be some ACC people that are getting this in their feed, and they're like, you guys are crazy. We're in the same position that you're in. Stop acting like this, except for we still have bigger brands than you do. And that last part might be true, but the big difference is the Big 12 has already survived losing their biggest brands and has already secured their seat at the table with this next TV contract. The ACC has not done that yet. And if Clemson and Florida State leave, if Miami and Louisville, as you mentioned, maybe, you know, then the Big Ten comes and poaches UNC or Virginia, or God forbid they finally convince Notre Dame to join a conference, right? I mean, it just feels inevitable that the ACC is going to get picked apart here at some point because every other conference beside the Big Ten and the SEC has, and they're like, you're naive if you think the ACC hasn't or isn't going to, pardon me.
Is it sustainable to have conference members like Stanford and Cal? I texted in our group thread.
It's not.
They're 5 conference games. Wes, if you travel around the entire earth, it's 24,900 miles. They're 5 ACC road games. They're going to travel 24,000 miles.
I believe it.
That's patently unsustainable.
It's ridiculous. And so I think we could, like, I think we all agree that eventually college football might be moving towards like some kind of NFL style, 2 conferences, a bunch of divisions, automatic qualifiers, all these different things. And that might be the final formation of college football that we've discussed. And that might be, in a weird way, what finally gets the sport back to being semi-regional. I think the toothpaste is out of that tube in terms of completely, but maybe at least getting back to being semi-regional where, again, as you mentioned it, Cal and Stanford aren't playing in a conference that's based out of the Atlantic coast. It's all nuts, Jed. It's all cats and dogs living in mass hysteria. And so, you know, I don't think any of us should be surprised that this is a possibility. I still give it a little bit of chance, a very small chance that Clemson and FSU would end up in the Big 12. It could certainly be a power play. This might just be them, like, you know, when you like the girl who's in your 3rd period class, so you want her to hear that you were talking to the girl in your 1st period class, so she gets jealous, right? Like, let's have the SEC hear that we're flirting with the Big 12, and maybe the SEC will ask us to the prom. I think there might be some of that in there as well, too. But again, when it's coming from credible sources, it is certainly worth a conversation, and it is certainly worth a consideration.
That's for sure. I mean, it's not Bobby's blog that's reporting this.
Exactly right.
It's not
Joe Schmo with 200 followers on Twitter. Yeah,
exactly. So, in other words, those conversations, if anything, it once again supports what we kind of already suspected, and that at every turn, the Big 12 is in the best hands possible with Brett Yormark, constantly pursuing even the long shots that might be out there to put the Big 12 in better position moving forward. So that's kind of what I got.
As we always say when we discuss the landscape of college football, and particularly as it relates to the future of college football, we will continue to monitor this story as we roll along here on In the Gun. This ain't going anywhere, and in fact, I bet you in the next few episodes or so, we'll have a follow-up or something more on this. But we got to get to our first break because something tangible that we do know is that Wednesday was the Big 12 Media Days out in Viva, Las Vegas, there for the first time at Allegiant Stadium, the home of the Las Vegas Raiders. Neal Brown spoke, Brett Yormark spoke, some things, some thoughts to get into on the other side. Wes Euler, Jed Drenning. Dang it! I was about to nail that exit there, and I totally just stumbled on the dismount. Wes Euler, Jed Drenning. You are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
ITG will be right back.
The kick is up, and it is good. Casey Lay buries it, and West Virginia beats Oklahoma.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
If you work the land, you just got to be a jack of all trades type. There's just too much to do. So if you got to be a welder or a farmer or a ditch digger, that's just who you are that day. Then tomorrow, you can be somebody else.
Get your Coyote at the new location of Johnston Equipment between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here as we get ready to discuss the Big 12 Media Days taking place, like I said before the break, for the first time now out in fabulous Las Vegas. Certainly worse places to go for a business trip. I do say so myself. And another thank you to our friends at Fortis, our guy Rick Lewis, before we get into all of this here. For roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed, you got to visit fortis.us.com. All right, Jed, I know there's some things from the commissioner you want to discuss. Of course, we both got some thoughts on a couple of things that Neal Brown had to say in his about, 13, 14 minutes of podium availability today. So where you want to start here first, Signal Caller?
Let's start with your mark. Again, I appreciate, first of all, he seems pretty straightforward in terms of providing the vision from the commissioner's office. So anytime he has a platform like this, to not just, address everybody, but to take questions, I come away feeling, all right, all things considered, again, you're not in a position of leverage. You're trying to jockey to be in the third position. And you've done a pretty good job since you took office of doing that. And one of the things that he talked about, again, it's about mixing the old with the new. I mean, we talk about Nelly at the halftime show, the Big 12 championship game with traditional college bands. Yep. He's all about the old and the new. So even one thing you said that jumped out at me, in this day and age when social media really is the straw that stirs so many drinks, the Big 12 has the second largest following, not third, second, when you look at a combination of X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram. So, I mean, who are we trying to attract? It's that demographic in terms of recruiting, right? One of the other things he talked about were these, when you talk to your TV partners, when you talk to ESPN and Fox, they're exploring new TV windows with those media partners. There's a lot going on every Saturday. There's a lot of competition for those limited time slots on Saturday. And it's just like back in the Big East days. That's one of the best things the Big East did, was we were the marquee matchup how many times on Thursday night, and to this
Wednesday night.
Those West Virginia Big East games on Thursday night are still some of the highest rated in ESPN history. So I don't know if that's where he's going with that, but I would imagine it is. Look, just from a personal travel standpoint, I'm not a fan of midweek games on the road, but I understand the motivation for doing that and the value that it could bring. So those were some of the interesting things that he talked about. There's talk of a Big 12 game in Ireland to start the season next August. Who knows who that might involve? This is just me completely guessing.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
Well, you would maybe lean into your Eastern brands, some combination of WVU or Cincinnati or UCF. I don't know, maybe to start the season over there. But he's talked about this Mexico City thing and the presence down there, starting with, I think it's women's soccer and then some baseball and maybe migrating toward a football game at some point, not in Mexico City, but across the border somewhere in Mexico. So he's open to all options. But you got to create some revenue streams to close that gap, because your TV contracts, as robust as they might be compared to what you thought you were going to get in the post-Oklahoma, post-Texas world, they're a lot better than we thought they'd be. But that being said, it's a heck of a chasm to try and bridge the distance between where we stand and where the Big Ten and the SEC stand. And that's where you even get into the NIL side of things. Like I saw a figure the other day where they anticipate 70% of NIL money to be at the power of the Super 2 conferences. So that leaves 30%, not just for the Big 12, but for everybody else. Sure. So you're going to have to come up with some non-traditional revenue streams, and I think he's the type of guy to do that.
Yeah, he absolutely is. I don't follow Brett Yormark's day-to-day happenings, but every time I do hear him speak, every time I hear him talk, every time he's around, he seems like the kind of guy that you want to navigate this uncertain time. I mean, if you're not in the Big Ten or the SEC, as we just discussed to open the show, it's a lot of uncertainty for everybody. But he is certainly being proactive with all of this, forward thinking with all of this. And he ruffled some feathers at his intro when he said that we are the third power conference in this collegiate landscape. That wasn't the exact quote, but had some ACC people a little in their feelings online. So yeah, hey, Brett Yormark, keep doing what you're doing, baby.
Absolutely. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we've talked in the past about the most meaningful thing you can ask for is access to the biggest prizes. Well, Wes, this is the first time we've been able to sit here before the preseason and say, all you got to do is win your league.
Yeah.
You're in.
Sure.
You're guaranteed a spot. This is no longer the CFP. This is no longer a 4-team or a 2-team format. You win the Big 12, not only are you in, you win the Big 12, you're most likely in the top 4 getting a bye outside of some strange circumstance. So
sure,
it's the first time we've been able to say that. The access will be there. Now, those at-larges, will they be dominated by the Super 2? Probably, but that's a conversation for a later day. Take care of business. You're at least playing for the biggest prizes. And then, we're going to get into some of what Neal talked about, and that's one of the things he alluded to. He's asked about the Penn State game. He said, yeah, of course that's meaningful, not just for us, but for the league and the brand of the Big 12. Those types of games, we have to win those types of games. But look, as a league, we got to find a way to win a few playoff games.
Yeah, he did say that.
I mean,
other than TCU, he said, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Other than TCU, what do we really have to show for our presence when we were there? So anyway.
Yeah, and that is one of the things to transition to Neal Brown's comments. As Jed mentioned, he did talk about how the Big 12 has to have some more playoff victories other than just TCU when he was asked about the Penn State game. But one thing that he said when he was asked about the Penn State game and the opportunity there that I really liked was the acknowledgement that this is a regional rivalry. And I believe the exact words he said were one that hasn't typically gone West Virginia's way.
Yes.
Or something along those lines. And he is absolutely correct. I looked it up here. I wrote it down in my notes. WVU has lost 30 of the last 32 games that we played against Penn State. Jed.
Well, we know the two.
I think
we know the two.
Jed, I think you could say that it's safe to say that has not gone our way historically. History has been theirs as it relates to that Penn State game. I like hearing a head coach say that. Some coaches would shy away from that. Some coaches wouldn't want to say that or admit that for the majority of the history of this rivalry, they've been the hammer and we've been the nail. But I think acknowledging that, making sure your team knows that, and hey, our fan base has had very few opportunities over the years to celebrate wins against these guys. Not only is this our last opportunity for the foreseeable future, but if you win this week 1, it springboards your whole season, and it gives your fan base bragging rights over these guys for the foreseeable future as well. I like that acknowledgement from the head coach that it's more than just a big game to start the season. There's some backdrop there as well.
It is, and there's times on the show, Wes, we talk about the difference in generations, right? And I think there's one right there. Like when you take Penn State, when I hear that, it probably means something different than when you hear that. Like when I hear that, it's so hard for me to explain for somebody who didn't suffer through it. Now, I would imagine somebody 20 years older than me be saying the same thing to me. But I remember the win in 1984. That just felt like, after 29 straight losses, that felt like it's hard to explain how heavy that yoke was that was lifted from us. That yoke that was lifted after that 1984 win over Penn State. It was just such a black cloud that was ever present way before me. And when that happened, I mean, it was a generational celebration in the sense that I've never seen us beat Penn State. And you know what? A lot of dads had at that point. I mean, my dad barely had, so it was a big, big deal. But yeah, when you say the only 2 times we've won out of so many since 1955, look, we all know the numbers because we suffered through it, 84 and 88. Other than that, not since Freddie Wyatt, 29 straight. So yes, they've owned us. And I remember the conversation I had with Garrett. It was some point last summer, and we were getting ready for the season to get amped up and everything. And we were talking about the opener, going to Happy Valley, going to Beaver Stadium. And Garrett and I were just kind of, shooting the breeze about it. And I said, I think you understand and appreciate this, but just so you know, in case you don't, if you guys somehow find a way to beat this team, you will forever be a god in this state that will never again pay for a beer anywhere. I mean, that's one of those games. That is one of those games that and you know what? I have to think, as good as Penn State's going to be, Penn State's not just going to make some noise. Penn State, with a 12-team format, I'd be shocked if they're not a playoff team. They're going to be a preseason top 5, top 10 at every poll. A lot of the polls are already out. That's what they are. They return so much talent. They're so dynamic and so explosive and so deep. But they're coming to our house for an opener. Look, stop with the noon stuff. I get it. Yeah, we'd all rather have a late start. I get it. But the brand equity we're going to get from the summer-long promotion from Fox, and I just have to feel it is going to be 12 on 11 on the field almost because of the present. In other words, Wes, I will take our 60 that are going to show up, and there's not going to be an empty seat in the house. I'll take our 60 in the baking hot sun of late August against the 110,000 that we faced under the lights in Happy Valley last year. I firmly believe our fans will make a difference in that game. And I'm not so sure. Maybe they're underestimating what, in fact, they're going to step into from an environment standpoint. Now we have a chance to be a pretty nasty football team, right? That's a different conversation. I'm just saying the venue and the environment are going to give us a puncher's chance. All of a sudden, they're going to be sitting there waiting for something to energize them and feed off of. And so I'm not real. That was a lot of the questions. He talked about the Penn State matchup. We're carrying a burden that's heavier than just for us. We're carrying the flag of the Big 12 because there's not a lot of marquee games with the new Big 12 members against teams like this. This is probably the biggest one. So, yes, it's, of course, meaningful for us for a long list of reasons, but it's meaningful for the league. And look, I would like to expedite the process of, Bobby Bowden always said that when you're building a program, there's 4 steps. You lose big, you lose close, you win big. Well, I always felt, there's actually a 5th step. And Bobby did this as well as anybody, and that's how do you handle the prosperity of winning big? So, I mean, I would like to expedite the process. And if you can find a way to get the crowd energized and shock the world, beat Penn State as a double-digit underdog, I want the X on our chest for every Big 12 team that's going to face us. That's where you want to be. That's where you can't sneak up on people forever. And last year we did some of that. Of course we did. We were picked 14th even late in the year, and we got humming a little bit. We had some teams at tension, but they still kind of thought it was a little bit of pie red or fool's gold. This year, if you beat Penn State and get humming a little bit early, you're not going to sneak up on anybody. So let's find out what you're all about, right? But yeah, the Penn State question came up, as you would think, because it's not just a West Virginia question. It's a Big 12 question at large.
Sure.
And that's why Neal was asked that.
Yeah, last thing on that that I'll add is I hope we finally get the payoff. And what I mean by that is we're now 3 straight years of starting our season on the road in a hostile environment against a P5, right? 2020,
you know where it was?
2021, it was Maryland.
Team in America? Yeah, go ahead, and I'll tell you.
I know. The only team in America that did that for 3 straight seasons, right? Only
We're
Power
the only
5
team in America that this year will be the 4th year we play 11 Power 5. We're the only team in America.
And I think we're the only team in America that has started the season with one for 4 straight years as well, too. So that's where I'm going with all this is, I mean, this group is used to you can be. No, I know. I was going to say 21 at Maryland, 22 at Pitt, 23 at Penn State. So 3 straight years you've started rivalry games on the road, hostile environments to varying degrees, because there were a lot of Mountaineers fans out there in Terp country. There were a lot of Mountaineer fans at Acrisure Stadium. And we all know Happy Valley's a little bit different of a beast than College Park in Pittsburgh. But this group is by now, I mean, they're accustomed to this. This is business. This is like Alabama playing in the SEC championship game. You just expect it every single year, right? They expect to start the season with a big game, but now you're finally getting it at home. Hopefully that makes a little bit of difference as well, too, just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying.
Ironically, Wes, I think one of the few teams in America that this will be the 4th year in a row they opened with not even a P5 anymore. It's now Power 4, Power Conference, I like to say.
Sure.
Penn State's won. 4 years in a row. This will be the 4th year in a row Penn State has opened, because they had some weird early season Big Ten openers to start the year.
That's
like
right. They
Illinois,
did against like Purdue, I think.
Yeah, it was weird. But they've done, to your point, we've done it on the road 3 straight years. And now here comes, if you want to call it the relief of playing Penn State, but it's the relief in the sense that you are at home
finally,
and you got 60,000 watching your back. And that will make such a seismic difference.
Sure will. Sure will. Another thank you to our friends at Johnston Equipment for being a presenting sponsor of In the Gun. Make sure you're stopping by their new location, Route 33, just outside of Weston. Jed, the other thing, aside from some Penn State stuff that I had written down here, the other thing that I wrote down, last thing that I wanted to make sure to discuss with you was I loved a little bit of the sassiness from Neal Brown today. All right. He was very direct in bringing up, I believe it was a reporter from Kansas asked him about being picked near the bottom of the conference last year. And he was we were picked 14th. We were picked dead last. He mentioned that a few times. He talked about how all the preseason polls he's seen so far, this team isn't ranked. He mentioned that a couple times. He also, at the end of his press conference, when he got up to leave, made a quick little quip about, thanks for coming. There are a lot more of you here than there were last year. Maybe that means more of you, believe in us or interested in us, something like that. Made a little snide comment there at the end. Jed, it feels like once again, listen, I don't think anything is as much red meat to the masses as being picked 14th in a 14-team conference, but you can already tell Neal is trying to maybe continue that mentality of we haven't arrived yet, we haven't proven anything yet, we're not in these preseason polls, we're picked in the middle of the conference still. I last year when Neal Brown was doing it, it seemed like a man who knew that he had to get his guys going to save his job. Now that Neal Brown's doing it 365 days or close later, it feels like a guy who's a little ticked off that people don't realize his team's coming. And I'm loving where we're at here 52 weeks later.
Yeah, it's funny because when you heard Coach Dillingham, the head coach at Arizona State, he was asked the same thing Neal was asked last year. And it was a fundamentally different answer. Did you hear his answer? Hey, what do you think about being picked last in the league this year? His answer was, that's fair. I mean, what's this program done in the last 3 years, right? He was all about it. He's like, what's this program done in the last 3 years? Now, that's the difference between a guy just getting started on the job and a guy who a lot of people viewed as being on the hot seat last year.
Sure.
So yeah, you're going to have a different perspective on that, right? But for the uninitiated, let's quickly recap. West Virginia picked 7th in the 16 team new Big 12 by the media. Who was ahead of West Virginia? Pick number 1 was Utah. I can, come up with a pretty fair case for why Utah is. I can understand that. That's a fair pick for number 1. Even Kansas State at number 2. I can make a case for why Kansas State's at number 2. I can make a case for why Oklahoma State, with what they have returning, is at number 3. Kansas came in at number 4. Arizona came in at number 5. If Jed Fish was still at Arizona and had not left to take the Washington job, you might have had Arizona as the preseason favorite. Iowa State slipped in at number 6. So again, I could make a case for each of the 6 ahead of us, but Wes, I can also make a case for us.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's kind of the point, right? I mean, you return 5 of the 7 guys who started on your offensive line last year. We had 7 guys start games, 5 of them are back. An all-league caliber tight end, a group of receivers who were very young, and I truly believe we're on the cusp of taking the next step in addition to the newcomers in that room. And that's before you get into the playmaking ability of Garrett Green. And I think you're going to see a year 2 jump as a starter from Garrett. The 1-2 punch of Jaheim and CJ. That's just on the offensive side of the football. And maybe it's because I think it's more internally on the defensive side. There's a certain element of confidence that we're going to find a way to be better. But yeah, I think a case can be made for why you're frustrated. That and he used this language, you probably caught on this, that he said this, Wes. He said, I don't understand why we're not in the top third. Well, it's not enough to be in the top third of the league. And that's a pretty good way of putting that. Because if you want to view the league as tiers, we're kind of hovering in the middle of those tiers at number 7, at least in the eyes of the media. But the media never won or lost the game. So once again, we turned the narrative on its ear last year. Now, I will say this. Who played in the Big 12 title game last year? Do you remember, Wes?
Last year, it was Texas and Okie State.
Okie State. Now, do you know where those 2 teams were projected or picked by the media in the preseason poll last year? Texas was number 1. So the media was all over that. The other team in the 7th. Big 12 championship game, 7th. Oklahoma State was picked 7th.
So Utah, see you in Dallas in December, baby.
That's kind of what I'm leaning towards. So, and then Iowa State was picked 10th, and they finished 4th. Mm-hmm. So this is far from an exact science. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, here's one of the benefits West Virginia is going to have. We're going to spend time in the coming episodes over the course of the next month and a half talking about schedule difficulty and this and that. But when you look at the 6 teams that came in ranked ahead of us in the preseason poll, we play 5 of them. So there's more than enough opportunity to take care of business and hack your way up that pecking order. So the opportunities are going to come. But Wes, I have to say this. One of the things that appealed to me that Neal did say, I loved the fact, because he alluded to this so many times last year, that reset. Remember the reset last January following the disappointing 5-7 underachieving season? He said we reset everything as a football program. It was our fresh start. He alluded to that reset again today. He said it's been, 19 months in now since we reset things last January. Mm-hmm. So that's not just a talking point. That's real. That's proof of concept. You reset the program. You told the kids you were resetting the program. You were reinventing yourselves. And I would argue, even philosophically, look what we did on both sides of the football. We leaned into more of a base 3-4 now in today's modern game. Everybody plays everything. Yes, we play even fronts. Yes, we play odd fronts. Yes, you could argue it's a 4-2-5-ish 3-4, but it was a new kind of scheme to better fit our personnel. And on the offensive side, it was a much different, approach offensively to fit our personnel. Sure. So we truly did reinvent ourselves in so many different ways, and we went 9-4 after doing it. So that reset continues into year 2. And I liked the fact that he doubled back and alluded to that once again, because that shows me it's in fact real.
Yeah, completely agree. That was another thing. Again, not the exact quote from Neal Brown here. I'm paraphrasing, but he kind of talked about, hey, it took us a little while to get it right, in the program with the right personalities, the right guys, the right mix, the right culture. Hey, and if last year's the starting point, 8-4 regular season with a bowl win to get you to 9 wins, I think we all got to be pretty excited about what 2024 could look like.
Yeah, and it depends. Your perspective's going to matter here. I mean, you glass half full, glass half empty. I mean, you're going to say, yeah, we were 9-4, but we could have dropped 2 or 3 of those games, or a break hadn't gone our way, or we hadn't done this, or we hadn't done that.
Or if we knocked down a Hail Mary in the back of the end zone.
Neal said, the question is, how do you go from being a 9-win team to an 11-win team? Now, let's think about that. You had a 24-20 lead in the fourth quarter against Oklahoma State on a botched special teams play at home. Game, set, match. The thing just kind of went sideways after that. You were in position to win that football game. You talk about what happened in Houston. We all know how that should have ended as opposed to how it did end. But as Bill Parcells always said, you are what your record says you are. We were 9-4. So, but that doesn't mean we didn't see right within our reach. Okay, what does it take to get to 11 instead of 9? Well, take care of business as you did in those close games to win them. Make the goal line stand against Texas Tech, block the field goal against TCU. We can go down the list of things we did to position ourselves to win those close games. But now, in addition to taking care of business in those games, also don't make the stupid mistake at the end of the Houston game. Right. Show you've grown as you're a more mature football team. Don't make the special teams gap that you did in the fourth quarter, a critical moment against a team like Oklahoma State that will pounce all over that. I mean, Ollie Gordon had 150 yards in the fourth quarter. I mean, the thing got completely out of control because of one botched special teams play. We just collapsed. So if you don't do those things, you're so close to taking that next step and being the 11-win team. Well, most of the guys that were on the roster that made that mistake are back. So now can we, in fact, take care of business in the way that we did in those close games that we won, but also take the step in eliminating those costly mistakes in the games that we lost? So I think it's fun to think about.
It certainly is, and that's where we're at now, and I think that's a good place to leave it for here today. But one final thing that I will say, as we get excited, as we get closer and closer to August and to kickoff here, and before we know it, camp's going to be starting at the end of the month. One of the things that Neal Brown said today was he also called Garrett Greene elite, and myself, the signal caller here, in the coming week or two are going to have some episodes breaking down Garrett Greene in great detail for you. Garrett Greene is the runner. Garrett Greene is the passer. And so if you're looking for more on the elite Garrett Greene, make sure you're keeping it locked right here to ITG in the coming weeks.
I'm glad you said that, because part of my notes right here, he was talking about Garrett and he said, I used the word undervalued. Garrett has to be a more efficient passer. We'll talk about that in the episode, which he knows. He's worked really hard at that since January. I think he has maybe even more of a chip on his shoulder this year than last. There are a lot of quarterbacks getting talked about in this league, and he's not really one of them. He was arguably the best runner last year, completed a lot of downfield passes, but isn't getting a lot of discussion. He's popular and respected in the locker room. He's a guy they want to fight for. So what I'll say, I think what Neal was alluding to there, you're not just getting Garrett Greene, you're getting a pissed off Garrett Greene. And that's the best of Garrett Greene. So, yes, you're getting a guy that's a junkyard dog to begin with. But in addition to that, I think he does have a pretty sizable chip on his shoulder. And if his track record is any indication, let's see how he responds to that chip. Because he's kind of back, making the final turn, getting ready for the wind draft to pick up. He's in the outside lane, making his way to the inside lane. And there's, when you look across the league, there's all these other quarterbacks, rightfully so, whether it's Noah Fafita, whether it's, Cam Rising's played 16 years at Utah. There are a lot of high-level quarterbacks.
What's the,
in this league.
Jed, what's the Oklahoma State's quarterback name? Alan
Bowman, yeah.
He lost to Will Grier in 2017.
Yes. Did you hear this? Cam Rising was offered an 8th year next year. He's allowed to come back for an 8th year. And he said, no, I think I'm done.
Joe.
Yeah. Are you? What was the
Cam Rising, Google this for me. Indeed.com. All right. Good Lord.
It's going to be Dr. Cam Rising before it's over.
Good Lord. Yeah. A lot of people are in college for 7 years. Yeah, Cam. They're called doctors.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking when he said that.
Well, that's great. That means we get like 4 more years of Garrett after this year, right? All right. Party on.
Absolutely.
Here we go.
But I mean, you Shedeur Sanders. I mean, there's all these guys that are more marquee.
Sure. Rocco Becht.
Rocco, Rocco's almost the blue collar among them. I kind of like Rocco getting
some
love.
Garrett, there's some Garrett Green.
It's not
vibes
just
there,
Anthony, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, I like that. What would I stand to gain from Garrett getting a bunch of love heaped on him right now? I don't want that.
Nope.
No.
No rat poison, Jed.
No. Hell with love heaped on you in July. I want the love heaped on Garrett Green in December. That's what I want.
100%.
That's what I want.
100%. I'm with you on that. Around the time that everyone's carving the turkey, I want them talking about Garrett Green.
Do you hear what Yormark said? He said that they came up with a phrase. I thought I wrote it down, but I don't see it here. Yeah, we will brand November as the race to a championship. He said because there's going to be such parity. November is going to be off the hook in this league. Yeah.
I won't tell you. I won't tell you Big 12 football is going to be better than the Big 10 or the SEC, but I will tell you the Big 12 is going to be the most entertaining brand of football and the most competitive brand of football as it relates to the Power Four conferences in the NCAA. That's exactly right. But that'll do it for this edition of ITG. More on Garrett Green, more on the offseason as we roll along here. A big thanks to our guy Skyler for throwing this all together for us as always. For the signal caller, Jed Drenning, the runaway beer truck, Owen Schmidt. I'm Wesley Euler. The one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
I love the stadium. I got a chance to play here. And this is awesome. This is the way I pictured it.
This mission is over. It's over.